Blacklist. Thanks for coming back, ladies and jellyfish. I am Jen Ponton, your host. It is wonderful to be in your ears on this beautiful day. And today, I am talking with one of the sharpest minds out there when it comes to thinking outside the box, my friend and yours, Brian Patacca. Come
Oh,
on in, Brian.
thank you so much. That intro made me, if you can see my face, I'm beet red. I rarely blush, and I'm for sure blushing right now. That is a lot coming from you, Jen. Thank you.
I am so excited to be here with you today.
Thank you. Thank you so much. I'm excited to be here with you too. I can't wait to hear, what we're talking about.
So I kind of can't help but jump in. I
Okay.
feel like anytime I see you really getting into the nitty gritty with someone, you think of things that had not even remotely occurred to me. And then the more exciting part is I sit and my brain just sort of bounces off of that for hours. And then I yes and the hell out of everything.
Great.
So I kind of wonder what that great big brain of yours is doing in this time where there's so much unknown, in this time where a lot of creatives can feel very frightened,
Mm,
can feel stagnated, can feel like, well, we were already operating in this set of circumstances that weren't ideal. We don't get to have authorship of our
ah,
careers. We have to be reliant on this casting director and this studio and this network and this the luck of whatever day, right?
yeah.
The 1% luck that we get at a booking rate, whatever it is. And now all of that has been washed away. So I feel like for people who have really been on the brink of something big and then boom, March happened.
Yeah. Yeah.
What's next?
Yeah, it's so, thank you for asking this question. And I have privilege here because my passion is to support people who are in what you just described, who are actors and performers who are getting those opportunities. So it's almost like the need for me, I put that in quotes because there's no need for me, but like the desire to have someone around who's like lifting you up is kind of, I think is really important right now, or someone who's on your side. Right. And so
Totally.
for me, it kind of plunged me into a really great position of being able to have impact, especially able to have impact, because people are now in front of their computers. They're on the computer. They're looking at emails a little bit more than they maybe were in the past when they were running to auditions or, running to go to this acting class or go to that casting director workshop or whatever. So there's a little bit more of maybe attention right now, I think, which is one of the things I think is a gift that has come out of this moment, is that I know that I'm looking at Facebook more. I know more people are talking about looking at Facebook more. Not that I'm the biggest fan of Facebook. I'm just going to put that out there, right? But however, I'm saying, right? I'm looking for the alternative. We'll all figure it out when we all figure it out, I think. But even people in my family or friends that I haven't talked to in a while, there's suddenly a deeper connection or connectivity around it, which I think is a little bit different than connection, but just like hearing from each other a little bit more. So for me, it has been like go full force into the work that you already do. So for me, also, I feel like I was gifted a little bit in this, like if I could turn on Facebook Live and talk to my audience all day long, it feels like I'm at Disneyland all day long. My job is to turn myself off at the end of the day because
Right.
there's nothing more. I just love to be there, right? To hear whatever's coming up, right? And that's not just like coach speak. That's actually the way that I feel inside of my soul, right? So the difficulty that I see actors specifically sitting with is, well, what the heck? Hello, what's going, like, is this even, does acting even art anymore? Does anybody care? Like, and so a lot of the news we have to hear is the negative, because it's like, Broadway isn't going to open until this point, and the person on this set got COVID, so the set shut down for a minute. And so what is hard in this moment, I think, especially in a news cycle, when we're in an election year, right? And there's a lot in the news. We can kind of leave that at that for now. You're right. The negativity gets more news time than positivity, and we know that. And I think that in our world, that happens as well. So like I said, people getting COVID on set, and so Broadway not opening for a long time, and so we can hear that and let that in. And part of what I've also seen that I will say gives me a great uplift is the reliance on people's ingenuity on making their own things, creating their own content, whether it has to be the fanciest high taste level content in the world, or just saying, hey, maybe now's the time for me to actually think about writing that thing I was thinking about writing, and without worrying about putting it into the world yet, just being open to, okay, so now I'm a little stuck in some way or another, physically stuck. I'm able to, maybe now's the time that I do some writing. So what I like about that is all the performer, writer, actor, creative people who've been sitting on ideas have a space now to say, okay, maybe I can take some action. Maybe it's okay for me to take action now. And so that they almost are granted permission to step out of the hamster wheel of, I have to be working on my career every single second of every single day, or I'm not worth anything. And what I'm giving you a long answer here. Are we okay with that, Jen?
Oh God, yes.
Okay, good. And the other thing that I think about
this is all day.
Okay. The other thing I think that does is it, so you know this, you've experienced this. Jen, have you ever had a job where like they asked you to do something and you were uncomfortable with it, or like they wanted to book you for an extra day and they weren't going to pay you more money? Did you ever have a moment like that ever on a job?
Oh, absolutely. Yes.
Yeah. And I think it triggers something in us where we're like, wait, this wonderful thing that this booking, let's imagine it's that I got, like suddenly is feeling unsafe, or like I feel like I'm on the plains of Africa and there could be a lion around the corner. I thought I was having a great time on the safari, and suddenly maybe there's a lion that I can't be hidden from, or whatever. And it can almost ruin your experience because you're suddenly having to advocate for yourself in the position, right?
1000%.
Right.
Yes.
And and that's where this is why I believe reps are so important for us, is you want to call your rep and say, they want me to work an extra day. Can you help me? You want to call your manager and agent and get help for that. But what I'm leading to, my long point here is, I think that actors are finding agency for themselves in a way they haven't in the past, because I think it is going to be a really shitty manager or agent who would say to you, well, you have to do this job regardless if they're doing COVID precautions or if you're comfortable with them, right? You're going to have to say, can you tell me exactly what it's like on that set? I need to know a little bit more before I'm ready to say yes to that job, or before I'm ready to say yes to that audition. And I think that muscle being born in actors, I think there's actually a little bit of like, I think danger in it in a good way, where actors are going to be a little bit more, I don't want to say selective because that sounds like like I'm so fancy, but a little bit more like I'm going to choose that this is a job I care about, right?
Because there's less desperation, right? Because it's no longer, I don't know, the golden calf. It's a job. You go to work and maybe you are exposed to things that you don't otherwise want to be exposed to. It doesn't make it a career, something magical being given to you. It makes it a job, and that has a gift to it.
Yeah. I love the way you said it makes it a job, because I think we don't often, like, every acting job I get is a mistake. Oh my God, it's an accident. It always feels like, oh my gosh, what an accident that I booked this job, right? And so now that there's more consciousness around the work piece of it, which is, I think, a lot of actors, if they're in the grind or in the struggle of, I want to get more auditions or I want to get representation, and that's the grind that they're kind of in, or different representation, right? And it can take away, oh yes, and I hate it. You have to remember, this is a business. Like, that phrase does not work for me, but the relationship you have with the idea that it is a business does, that makes more sense.
Right. How you show up going to a job, yes, I agree. I think personifying it less is healthy for us, without turning it into this faceless corporation like the business. No, but it is showing up and going to work. We may as well bring a lunch pail, which we might actually have to do now. Who knows?
But I love what you said just now too, because the showing up and going to work is, don't act like the actors are the only one thinking about what's going to be on set. The casting director, the writer, the producer, the costume person, the hair and makeup, the PA, everyone's thinking about what it's going to be like on set. Totally. So it's not out of left field for you to ask those questions. So sometimes I think there's like, should I even be allowed to ask the question of this? And that, I think now is the time to find that empowerment. Which I think is so cool.
I like that. It's very grounding. I think, I'm all for buying into the magic always, because it gets us excited and it makes us passionate. But also, the more grounded and normalized you can make it feel, the better across the board. It just lowers the stakes on your anxiety and your fears, and
And I think what you've also just said is like, and then the magic will be the magic. Like, you won't have that to interfere or poison the magic, right? To like, I'm going to be thinking about this the whole time, but I'm so excited to book this job. Well, why don't we get clear on that and make it explicit? Like, hey, are you guys using masks? What's lunch going to look like? Can I just get a little more? Like, I'll tell you the best example I have of this is I called my dentist, because I was like, it's getting to be time for me to get my teeth cleaned. And I wanted to go. And I was like, I don't feel great about it yet. And I called my dentist and I called the receptionist, picked up the phone. And I said, can you just tell me what it's like to come there right now? And she spent like 5 or 8 minutes with me. Really, this is what it'll be like. This is what the waiting room is like. And just walked me through the entire thing. And I can tell you that my anxiety level, which was here, was like, oh, I'm going to be totally fine.
That's awesome.
Right. And I think that's what we want to be able to have that conversation. And I know this is going off a little bit of what you asked, but I think that the ability to take care of your anxiety in this moment is like, you have to advocate for yourself.
It's huge. It's all there is. And I think that this, that the, the reshuffling of the paradigm to once again remember that no, your actual physical safety and presence on this earth is tantamount. And no matter what you think you're worried about, you're always really, truly worried about that. Having that expressed in such an obvious, completely stripped bare way is kind of like, oh, yeah. The other stuff is bullshit.
Yeah.
Sometimes it's good bullshit and sometimes it's not, but it is bullshit.
Well, also, and I love what you're saying, because it made me just think about like, now that thing we have about, do people really even care about actors? They actually have to care about you a lot right now. And they are worried about having an actor come to set as much as you are worried about going. Well, we hope so, right? Like,
yes, I get that sensation.
Right. That's what we want to live it too. So to sum up around what is people doing during this time, that's like where they're going, right? I'm liking that I see actors who are trying to write for themselves and create their own creative opportunities. I also have been really excited by actors who are saying, oh, because I've seen a few clients do this where the business is a little bit down. And so the people that I work with in the business, casting director, writer, producer, director, their business is a little bit down too. I'm not the only one here who's in this experience because we're all in the same business. And so now I can speak to or connect with, whether that's in marketing or an email or Instagram or whatever it is, I can connect with them on a very human level, which I didn't feel like I had permission to before, perhaps in the past. And I think that is such a gift, you know?
Yep.
And
it is.
And Jen, I was going to say for yourself, for you, I know you do a really great job inside the business of your career. And so I was just thinking about like, you know, there's probably someone who you've worked with in the past that could hear from you as a human being with nothing to do with the business. Do you know what I mean? Like,
right?
Did someone occur to you? I saw your eyes go up just now. Did someone occur to you when I said that?
A really bizarre one, because it's not true, but it's the best thought ever. My thought was like, man, I should reach out to Jeff Goldblum.
I mean, you have to commit to that now. That is a really good one.
Yeah. Yes. I mean, I know for a fact that he is currently filming the final Jurassic Park movie. And I'm so psyched.
Yeah.
But yeah, that was my thought. Like, oh my God, just kicking back with Jeff Goldblum would be
right. And so,
amazing.
and part of what I think is so the ease that we can have with that is no matter if you are writing from a place of honest, like, hope you're doing well in this weird time or whatever, like whatever language you use to say that, it is going to be received in some way or another, whether or not they write you back. That's going to be received in some way or another, right? I also think this is like a pet peeve I'm just going to share with everybody since we're here. I don't like it when I receive an email that says to me something like, I really, you know, during this difficult time, during this hard time, during this, like when it actually takes away what my experience of the time might be like.
Yeah.
We don't do this in conversations, because you never say, well, you must be upset because, like, if you did, you'd feel like you're being stopped, go away. Why are you being so in my face about the way I feel? I'll tell you how I feel. And so there's something around permission to let people have their own pandemic, let people have their own quarantine. And I don't know, you guys, if you're listening to this now, I don't know the day this is going to be released, you know, I'm not the host. I'm so sorry, Jen. Excuse me. Cut. We won't cut that part out. Cut that part out, editor. We're not going to say that. Okay. All right. You can find your way to be done, I think, Jen, if that makes sense. I feel like we did a good job.
No, that's great. That's great. Yes, I absolutely believe, I could not agree more, because there are absolutely gifts of this time. And I think those exist for everyone. To some degree or another. Obviously, I think we are in a dire moment as a world, but individually, who knows what you're getting more time to do? To renovate your office, to spend more time with your partner, to, oh my God, my dog sees me 24 hours a day and he never gets tired of me. It's like every day that passes, he's more excited that I'm home. And now I'm like, oh my God, if the world goes back to whatever was normal, like if I'm back to work, what is he gonna do? I'm gonna
Yes.
need a rider for my dog in my contract.
We got a puppy during this time,
You
and
did.
like if we leave he's so good with us leaving the room, but he can kind of hear the front door. So when the front door closes, we're like, I think he's gonna bark for a little while because he's so used to us being around, right? Yeah,
Yes.
yeah,
Yes.
yeah.
I know it's great. It's a wonderful thing.
Mm-hmm.
That thing is a wonderful thing. And there are, I mean, I've been cooking so much. I don't waste food anymore. I use my groceries.
So
It's
nice.
awesome.
So nice. And
Yeah.
I'm also, this isn't to make light of, there is a recession right now. There are people who
For
don't have jobs. This is not that at all. And I want to make sure, and you know that, Jen, I know you know
a
that.
thousand
But we're
percent.
also, but the reason why I'm saying this is, if you're actually trying to connect with someone on a human level, I think you need to meet them where you are instead of meet them where they are instead of decide where they are. Right.
Right,
So it
right.
could look more like a
Yes.
question than this is how you're feeling. Because
Exactly.
it can stir something in them. So it can like in this, I would think that language that can work for that is like upside down time or weird time or
Yeah.
unusual time, right? Just
These
checking in with you.
unprecedented times.
Yes, unprecedented times, right? I
Yes,
saw
and then it
a tweet
opens
the other day. Go ahead, go ahead.
then it opens up the likelihood that you'll respond to their email, to be frank,
Right,
if you're asking the
right.
question as opposed to painting it on them. What did you see the other day?
Yeah, I saw a tweet the other day that said, please hesitate to reach out to me. Because
I love that.
I just thought it was so not who I am, but also like that's I totally get why you would say that at times, right?
Yes, yes.
Right. So, and I just share that with you. Yeah.
I love that.
So good.
Amazing. You're such a good guest.
Thank you so much. Thank you for having me on the show today. I really appreciate it.
My pleasure. My pleasure.
And scene. All right. And then there'll be like a fun little music where it switches us back again and we'll get right into it. And I will have already introduced you. So this part will feel a little bit more like we're just talking already, but this is going so great. I'm so happy, Jen. Thank you so much. That was really helpful. Yeah.
Oh,
Okay.
I'm so happy.
So people, I am so excited because I have the glorious, incredible Jen Ponton here with me today. And if you were to say to someone, who knows how to put their finger on the pulse and create the thing that the world needs that will also entertain them, it is what Jen does. She makes incredible content. I've seen only a portion of some of it, I'll tell you, because she's so prolific in what she does. And the biggest heart you've ever had the privilege to sit across from. And so I'm so glad to have her on today because when I spoke to Jen, we have these little secret conversations before we record where we talk about, well, what do we really want to talk about, And Jen said, I really want to talk about creative people making content. And I was like, oh, please, because you will know how to speak to this in a way that makes it feel possible for you and makes it feel worthy and makes it feel like it fits you, which is one of the things I think, Jen, you do so well, is that when you create content, it feels like it is something that is made for you, which it is made for you, but it also doesn't feel like you're trying to copy someone else's. You don't feel like you're trying to like grab somebody else's idea and fit it to yourself. It feels like a lot of thought has gone into the creation of the idea, which is so where we might let's start writing a script, but I often find that the seminal idea that you've come up with is one that embraces who you are and all that you are. So that is all to say. I want to make sure I don't overwrite and Jen, I'm kind of like not even talking about this. And also Jen's like baller actress with tons of credits. Check her out on IMDb. You'll see like all her guest stars and recurring and all the things she's done. And so I don't want to negate or neglect any of that today, Jen, because I know that that's part and parcel with what you create. But to get us started, if we could today, I wanted to ask you specifically, I did a little bit of trolling of your website and of all the things you do. Tell us a little bit how it's going during this time. How's it going during this pandemic time, during this quarantine time? How are you doing over there?
Weird. Some good, some struggles. Overall very weird, but I will say lots of permission. I've just had lots of permission to explore who I am. I mean, I don't know if you know this. I came out during quarantine.
Oh wait, I knew that you came out. I didn't know it was during quarantine. Tell us about that.
So I have, it's been a very slow realization, but about a year ago, I started realizing that I identify as queer, which is a wonderful thing and a destabilizing thing when you are 35 years old and you live a very heteronormative life. And I began talking with a therapist and sort of just diving deep and feeling really distressed and like my life was totally flipped inside out, upside down. And ultimately, I felt like I had excavated enough where it was something that I was starting to accept about myself and
Mm-hmm.
that I wanted to embrace and fold into my life.
Mm-hmm.
And so I came out for my birthday this year, which is during Pride Month. It's the day after Pride Day, on June 27th.
Wow. And how, what was the reception like for you?
Lovely. So lovely, so warm. Just a lot of people saying welcome to the
Mm.
family, welcome to the community. Um, yes, warmth and belonging. And
And and
that's lovely.
I'm glad you had that experience with immediate reaction, and also, as you said, and living a heteronormative life. Was there some disorientation in that moment of like coming back to your not coming back to, because you didn't leave that life, and which
Right.
probably also was part of this disjointedness you were feeling. Yeah.
Yeah, 1,000%. 1,000%. I mean, I think for the most part, I was able to find a lot of examples of people who are queer or bi or pan or however they fall under that panoply, where they are
Mhm.
still in love with a heteronormative partner and
Yeah.
can still identify the way they identify and live that way without putting the kibosh on that.
Right. Right.
So being validated that I could be who I am despite the fact that, I'm not necessarily living a very visibly queer lifestyle
Hmm.
is reassuring. Because,
Yeah.
who knows what it means for the future, but for now, and I think something beautiful about it happening during the pandemic is that it's allowed to be just mine.
Mm. Talk more about that.
So, like, I don't know if you experienced this, but I've definitely heard the crazy and wonderful and wild stories about like people coming out and then just like boom, they're out all
Yeah.
night and at
Yes.
the clubs and at the parties and having a grand old time just like thrown into the ocean, and so much of it becomes about outside in.
Yeah.
I can embody this more if I'm with these people, if I'm making out with these people, if I'm sleeping with these people, if I'm just in the community and
Hmm.
and living that life. And there's nothing wrong with that.
Right.
Amazing. That's part of that's part of your what do I want to say? Uh it's like fraternity rush week,
Right. Sure. Yes. 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 Totally.
However, having that moment for myself in a time that's really just about internal processing and something being solo, there is no way for me to externally validate this right now.
Mm.
There is no community I can like go hang with or party with or go to clubs with, and it's all really just about who I feel I am and the thoughts I
Mm.
allow myself to have and the way I allow myself to just be with myself and in my head and in my heart. And
Yeah.
that's kind of lovely and not at all as intimidating as the thought of like, well, gotta like,
Yeah.
welcome to Pride Week.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, what I love about your saying, Jen, is that I even talk about this with actors. As you know, you get this idea, you get this understanding about yourself, like I'm meant to be an actor, or you get this understanding of like I think that I'm queer, or I got the understanding I think that I'm gay, right? You kind of like are not. I feel like there's for some of us, there's a lack of certainty when that idea comes to us, right? We have to dig deeper on it, right? And we suddenly go outside to see if we could find the answer by what other acting schools are people going to? What other acting teachers, what headshots do they get? What reels do they get? We just kind of out, and we lose that connection to whatever called us to that in the first place in some ways.
Yep.
And so what I love that you're saying is I kind of had didn't have that many outside things to run toward. So it let me, or gave me permission to make it all about me in the best way possible. Make it all about my own discovery process, which I might have said, let me go hang out with these friends because they identify that way and maybe I'll get some answers from them or whatever. So let it be more organic to yourself. I love that.
Right. And let me just be still with it too. Like, how many times do we avoid the stillness in order to because it's just too anxiety inducing. It's that stillness is too powerful and it means too much. And well, all I have is stillness. So if I just go sit on the deck and think about how queer I am, that's that's cool.
Jen, I heard this quote yesterday, and I think it's Pascal, the French philosopher, who said, all of the world's problems can be summed up in man's ability not to sit in a room quietly.
Oh my God, ain't that the truth?
And I was like, oh, every war, I was like, oh man, yeah. I was just like, yep. And so the way you just described it really resonated for me just now.
I love that.
So what a great birthday you've had.
What a great birthday. Yes, it was lovely. It was lovely. So, I mean, obviously there are stressful questions. I don't know what folding that into my life in the way that life presents itself in the years to come looks like, but I know what it feels like right now, and I can let this time be calm and full of meaning and about me and my relationship to myself and the person that I didn't think was there but is there, and how exciting that is. And that's an exciting and beautiful thing. So it's been weird because before I did, it was also a ton of anxiety and just crying and therapy and anxiety and crying and therapy.
I'm sorry, who am I?
Yeah.
Right. Yeah. So in this journey of where you're trying, I'm so super curious. I want to be so do you have any new ideas for new things you want to make? Because I know you're always making, are you totally, has this brought any new ideas of what might be next for you? You don't have to tell us the idea because it's too baby.
Definitely. Well, here I will be very transparent with this. I have been writing a feature. I've been writing a feature that is about two cis women falling in love with each other. And it's not otherwise like a queer empowerment film. It's a film just about love being something that is so non-binary, love being something that two individuals can share. And even if you think you're a certain way and you think you have these certain limitations, what if you just fall in love with somebody? And so these two women who are otherwise identified as heterosexual just realize they have this spark and they fall in love. And I've been working on this project for a longer time than I have really acknowledged that I am queer.
Wait, let's just stop. So your creativity was telling you before you were telling you, is what I'm hearing you say a little bit.
The craziest thing is that I'm writing this script for a dear and beloved friend of mine. She will be one of the stars. She will be the producer, and I'm her screenwriter. But she reached out to me about it, and I love the story and I love these characters. And as I'm writing and as it's happening, I'm other feelings happening. And then I told her fairly soon after I came out, and I was like, hey, just so you know, the script means more now. So I feel like I can lean into it now more. And I think that there is so much. What I just believe in any kind of marginalization is that it's important to have creative works that highlight that marginalization, the power of it, the power of Black-centric art, the power of queer-centric art, the power of size inclusivity and diversity, and leaning into those backgrounds and life experiences. And there is equal power in just normalizing them.
Oh, God, preach. I think this is so important. One of my guests on the show, she was talking about how disabled people don't want to just play disabled characters, meaning, sure, it's part of their life, but it's not the thing of their life.
Yes.
Right. And
Right.
so and what you just said is also true. We do need to have stories of power, of overcome, so that we can see and can tell those stories. That's not because that is part of the journey that many of us are on. Right. But I think that what you just said is so important, that it's not part of it. It's not the thing.
Absolutely. Like the brilliant, amazing day will be when like a Black disabled queer woman stars in a studio rom-com, and there is no emphasis placed on any of her marginalized identities.
Right.
That is gonna be huge because yes, it says it says yes, you see these things, and it doesn't nullify the validity of my ability to be a profound storyteller.
Yeah. And
That's
nor does it
huge.
need to be the thing that makes my story worthwhile, which is, I think, is actually what you're
Right.
saying. Yeah, my story is worthwhile
Right.
with or without this. And right. Yeah. Do you
Yeah.
watch the show Rami by chance?
Not yet.
Okay. So they're on Rami. I think they're doing such a nice, if I'm allowed to critique a show for a second, they're doing such a good job. There's a disabled character on the show, and it is not about his disability. He is just a character, and it feels so,
Yes.
and actually while watching it, it is so refreshing and like, thank you. There's this different kind of affinity for the story that comes out because of it. And I'd be curious what other people think of that. So we'll talk about that more later, I
Nice.
guess. But
Yes,
I
I've
wanted
heard
to share
incredible
that.
things about it. It's on
Yeah,
my
that's
list.
great. So tell us. So, we talked about a little bit like what you want to talk about here. I'm like wanting to ask you about some of the things you've already created. Can we go there for a second?
Yeah, of course.
So can I read the log line that you sent to me about one of your projects that I'm just obsessed with?
You
So
sure can.
I've watched this. I think I don't remember what you made. Did you make the trailer to Queens of Daytime public, or was it an episode?
No, it's the trailer. The trailer's
Okay,
public.
so
I
I saw
didn't
it and
fully produce anything. I just
okay,
made these. Yeah.
this needs to be made. Anybody listening, this is the show that needs to be made because it is so good. And I love this, how she describes this. It's called Queens of Daytime, a 1950s whimsical dramedy. Two intrepid women find themselves producing and writing in an oasis of female empowerment soap operas. Maisel crossed with Mad Men. What I love about what you described here is I tapped into this idea about like in Schitt's Creek, they don't talk about people being gay. And it's just so normalized. That's what the show's been celebrated for that reason. And what I love, you said a oasis of female empowerment. I literally just went to this world of, are we not even concerned? Are we not like, is there not even thing that we think about? We're not making that part of it. Can you talk about how the story came to be and why you love it?
Yes, of course I can. So I co-created this with my co-writer Louise Schaefer, who is a 77-year-old soap star from like the whole world of soaps. She won an Emmy for her role on Ryan's Hope in the 80s, and she spent all of her actress days, i.e. pre-40, because sexism in the 80s. She spent all of her actress days as a soap actress and then moved on to writing for the soaps when the union went on strike. So she scabbed. But she lived in that world and learned very quickly that so much of what is written off by prime time and just by society at large, saying, oh, soaps, just that schlock, right?
Uh-huh.
Soaps were, for decades and decades before prime time really got into it, were the first to address virtually every important social issue that could face Americans. Anything that people were too scared to talk about in polite company, divorce, reproductive rights, interracial relationships, um, all the AIDS crisis. Soaps were the first to address AIDS, and of course, LGBTQ relationships. Like these were things that nighttime TV would not touch with a 10-foot pole, and soaps were the first to really bring them out into the light. And soaps also had a much larger viewership because women were not working as much. So they were
Mm-hmm.
stuck home along with men who were disabled, retirees, children who were home from school, the viewership for soaps was huge. They were just undervalued. And soaps themselves were undervalued. And so in the 50s and 60s, soaps were not even owned by networks. They were owned by like detergent companies.
Right, right.
And they were just meant to be commercials. And because they had such they had such huge profits for such little expense. They decided to cut corners wherever they could because they knew no matter what, they would sell the Mop and Glow, they would sell the Clorox, they'd sell all of that stuff. So instead of having men who were the only individuals writing and producing and directing TV, instead of having men work on their garbage commercial show, they were like, well, we could save a lot of money by just having women do it, like, because it was seen as nothing. And so women who had never worked in television were being hired to write and produce. And so you had these undervalued, underestimated women put in positions of social power. It's clear, like, we need to be clear that they were white women, so this was never a black woman's game.
Sure. Right.
But it was a huge shift in power. And so they were able to basically, like when the cats are away, the mice will play, the men weren't paying attention to these storylines. And so women were able to sneak in things about social justice and women's rights and just the things that they needed to know about that nobody wanted to talk about, that no one wanted to help them with. And one of the first things that we cover in the show that you see in the trailer is that soaps made pap smears an actual talking point. Like women didn't know that there was a way to screen for uterine cancer. And so pap smears were talked about on a show where a character was experiencing symptoms and went to a doctor and got a pap smear and was diagnosed with like an early stage of uterine cancer, and she was treated and she made it through. And that was huge because that was not given to women before.
We have to also remember this is not a time when we're seeing pharmaceutical ads every other commercial either.
Right.
This is not right. So we're not getting those stories told to us in that way.
Right.
And going to the doctor was even a bigger event. Like, you went to the doctor. What? Right. Yeah. Right. Wow.
Yeah.
So wait, so Jen, how did the idea come to you guys? Was it because you're just friends with her?
It's our mutual friend. Okay. One of my best friends and one of her best friends, same person, for years, this person heard from me that I was really getting into writing more and I was finding my stride and finding my voice and finding my confidence in writing scripts. And she was hearing from Louise, who she's known for like 50 years. Louise saying, I just really always wanted to tell my story about my time in the soaps and what they really were so important for. And eventually Deb was like, Louise, I want to introduce you to Jen. And so she linked us up. And I have to be frank, I didn't know anything about soaps before. I did not think I cared. I didn't and so
like, what am I going to do with this lady that my friends introduced me to?
I'm right? And Deb was like, she buried the lead and she was like, ooh, just wait. Louise has a great TV idea for you. And here I'm thinking like, ooh, horror stories or like big juicy or whatever. And I talked to Louise and she's like, it's about soap operas. And I'm like,
So I want to really track this for our listeners here because you like kind of shit on this idea. No way. What made you change your mind? What happened? Or what did you hear?
The importance of this being the actual historic significance of that. And I think I'm one when it comes to narrative fiction, I think it's okay to rewrite history. I'm not the kind of person who says, well, we didn't really see Black people doing this back then, so we can't no. What good is that going to do us? Yes, we all know what the history books say. Can't we just enjoy something new? It's not a book report. It's a TV show. Mm-hmm. So Louise and I worked on fictionalizing it enough to be well integrated racially. And ultimately, the story that we came up with is that our intrepid producer, Addie, hires a radical liberal, pretty much socialist, but I'm all for that, right? A radical liberal socialist civil rights activist who is queer. Hello,
Right.
named Laurel, and she finds her as a playwright. Laurel is a playwright, and she's doing stuff for like La Mama and like off
Avant-garde, etchy,
yes,
sketchy stuff, weird
exactly,
stuff. Right. Yeah.
weird stuff, and like the stuff that is socially poignant and really of that time, the stuff that we can read right now and be like, why did no one listen to Lorraine Hansberry? You know, like,
Yes.
and Addie finds Laurel, and Laurel's like, oh, I don't do soaps. I do like real theater. And Addie's like, yeah, but you're saying important things, and I love the way you say it. And I need to fix my show. My show needs to mean something. And ultimately, Laurel comes to see her set, and she realizes that the Black actress who plays the help on the fictional TV show, she recognizes her from off Broadway and is like, you have Jessie? And Addie's like, oh yeah, she's great. And she's like, I don't think you realize how great she is. Like, she did this and this and this and this, and I have seen her a million times and I've always wanted to work with her. How can I see more of what she's doing? And Addie's like, oh no, that scene is it. You know, she brings out the tea and that's fine. And Laurel's like, if you're gonna want to work with me, you're gonna need to change
I
that
love
up.
it.
And they have a last minute emergency on set where a guest actress doesn't show up to be the partner for the lead in this like delivery of bad news scene. And Laurel is there while this emergency is happening on set. And Laurel's like, well, you don't have time to recast. I can make it so that this scene works with Jesse's character in there. And they ultimately film the scene with Jesse in her role as this housekeeper, being there for and with
Got
the
it.
lead white actress who
Yeah.
is going, you know, who's having this giant heart-wrenching scene of poignant loss. And it begins a turning point where Laurel starts to form this show not so much around the normal white melodrama, but focuses on Jesse's character's story and her family and what's actually going on in her life that's not about serving white folks,
Yeah.
and how she has a teenage son who's, and it's all in 1958, so it's like right before civil rights
Yeah.
becomes so well embraced by more and more people. So it's still incredibly dangerous. There are freedom rides where people are not heard from for weeks and you don't know what they've gone into, if they're going to come home. And the thing that I like, the medicine that I like to hide in the ice cream is that this is not a feel-good show about white people saving black people. This is actually a show about the insidiousness of white feminism. Karens. And how, and as you know, as progressive as she is, how complicit is Laurel in trying to be the voice for progressive black women, and how is Addie holding them back? And then when it comes to this act, to the white lead actress, when in real life they're best friends, she and Jesse,
Ah.
how is she threatened by her black friend taking over the spotlight when she herself is a 45-year-old white woman who is already afraid of losing her age and her, forgive me, her fuckability and, you know,
Right.
all of
Right.
the things that
Right.
are still maddeningly prevalent. But
Yep.
yeah, it feels like the thing I can say, and it feels like the thing that we need to hear, and we need to keep hearing it and seeing it over and over again until we see our own biases and our own behaviors clearly enough that we can start to interrupt them.
Right. And Jen, it's so clear when you're talking about this, your passion around it, having that, you know, medicine within the, what did you call it?
Ice cream.
Ice cream,
Medicine
right.
in
The
the
medicine, the
cream.
ice cream, right. And holding up a mirror for us to see who we're being at times, right? Because anyone can see
Yeah.
themselves in what you've just described. And so what I'm noticing is, for you, do all of your creative passions involve some degree of that for you? Or some of them just delightful cupcakes and that's the end of the story.
Some of them are just really fun, but I think even then I find such meaning in growth as a person that all of the characters that I write go through some kind of reimagining where they somehow are more morally strong than they thought they were, or they realize that they need to heal this element of their life before that they can healthfully do something else. Yeah, everybody kind of goes through it. And I think specifically in talking, I mean, in this moment, Louise and I wrote this in late 2017, and it's only become more and more, the need for it has only become
Mm-hmm.
more and more profound because we can't put it all on the shoulders of Black folks. Like,
Mm-hmm.
it's not just about seeing more Black people. It definitely is. And it's definitely about respecting and amplifying more and more Black people. But it's also making sure that the white representation and the white voices that continue to be out there are taking responsibility, are acknowledging what our role is, needs to be in a world that we want to heal in the way that we do.
Right. Yeah. I mean, what you're describing to me, it feels like some degree of reparations as you describe it in that way, that we need to be able to, I mean, I know that other people made this analogy. I'm not the first, but that how Germany has owned what they owned World War II, right? And we have never owned slavery. In
Oh,
fact,
no.
we've built statues to on the other side of the war, in fact, right? So and so this is, I know I'm going quick. I went really quickly from your soap opera show to slavery. I just want to make sure I would
No,
stay with
no,
it.
it's true,
But
right? But
that's
like, it's all the same.
right. And so what I loved about what you're saying is it is very hard for people to see, we're going deep now, their own biases at times. And so
Yeah,
what you said to me, this is not a white savior story. This is a story where I'm going to make you see white bias so that you can, whatever you're going to do with it, but it's going to be, you're going to be able to see where it shows up and how other women were holding other women back because they were Black. They didn't know they
yeah,
were doing it, or they did know they were, like, all
right,
of that part of the, yeah, I
right,
love that. I love
right. And these moments of redemption, and obviously it's not going to be like, yes, all is forgiven, but it's definitely these moments of like, it can't quite be cancel culture, right? Because we have
Mm-hmm.
to give some room. I think that there are definitely boundaries on that. There are people that I would love to cancel forever, and I think it's absolutely okay. But
Yes.
definitely when it comes to reasonably normal, insidious levels of like white supremacy on the way that white people behave. Obviously, we're not counting in like overt violence or
Mm-hmm.
anything terrible like that, but the insidious ways in which we conduct ourselves in ways that undermine people of color, the Black community, women, trans folks, the queer community, like all of it. I think those are things that we can recover from because we're basically doing what we were taught
To me,
to a
it's an
certain extent.
unlearning. It's an
It's an
unlearning. All
unlearning.
right. I mean,
Yeah.
and for some people, and I'm sure I'm not saying some people is not me when I say this. There are innate places where I still have to uncover, and that's why the work is
Mm,
long and it is not a quick fix. Because
no.
yesterday I was talking with a bunch of actors, and we were talking about how productivity has become God over all things, and that is a misogynistic, capitalistic point of view that is not
Right.
helpful to us, right? Because
Right.
and I always talk about how we want to try to move in a circle instead of a straight line, and it suddenly like opens things up the way you even think about things. And so all of these, I just love that this is where your creativity leads you to. So as you know, as we talked about this, and you were talking about how vital you think it is for people to be creating, what are you wanting people to hear when they hear the story of what you're sharing just now? Is there something you want them to hear in this or be inspired in them specifically?
I definitely think that we're all, as creatives, as artists, as people who are very heart-centered in general, I think we're all having a moment of like, how is my voice important in this moment? And there are so many things that need the importance of your voice and heart behind them. There are so many. The bottom line through and through is that right now we are living with with a giant wound to our at least national, but I would say closer to global sense of kindness and harmony. And one of the building blocks of kindness is just empathy, being able to listen and watch people being human and allowing them to own their stories and respect them as individuals who can make their own decisions. That's what we accept when we watch art, when we watch stories. And you can choose whatever lane feels most resonant in your own heart. I mean, as a white woman, specifically as a plus size white woman, I'm also specifically in a community that is held up and created, exists, and held up by Black women. And yet, Black women are still deeply, deeply discriminated against in the plus size community. So I feel a huge responsibility, not only as a white woman, but also as a white woman who has found deep joy and healing because of the labor of Black femmes. Huge. I feel like that is my calling and my responsibility to help bridge that. But whatever it might be for any given artist, like just find that space in your heart that you want in healing for the world. And I think the stories will come from there. And it doesn't matter if they're bad, right? Like it really doesn't, because there are so many bad things that lead to a good thing. That the importance is that you kind of nurture and nourish that space in your heart, and you just create space for ideas and creativity around it. It's like doing morning pages, right? It's the same reason that morning pages are a thing. I think that is a great place to just start with, like, there's so many things to say right now. How do I know the right one? Just think about all the stuff going on in the world and kind of what keeps you up at night the most, I think.
Yeah, Jen, one of the things that you're saying here that I really love is, so many of us like, well, what do I have to say? What do I have to say? What's important about what I have to say? And I always say, and you might be able to help me articulate this better, is lean into the cards you were dealt. Like lean into, I was dealt, whether they're good. I'm not saying cards being dealt are good or bad, right? I'm dealt the white, cisgendered, gay man, born in Ohio, has had some privilege and also has had some non-privilege because of his gayhood, but because passing and all like, so, and and also, or I'm really into plants and I want to talk, like, that's not my thing, but like, it also could be just totally like, what are you into could be the answer to this as well. Right.
Yes. 1,000%.
Right. And is there something around, like, to articulate that for other people? Is that the same advice that you'd give, or is there something you'd add to that? Because that's kind of where I come from sometimes. I wonder if there's another piece, because you're prolifically creative. And so I'm just curious if there's other places that kind of you get inspired by.
I'm very, very emotional. I get inspired by feelings. Like, so if something affects me deeply, I'm the kind of person who's like, ooh, what is the root of that thing? And it's like down, 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 down through abandonment, down, down, down through disappointments, and and like all of this stuff. And then I'm like, ooh, what a cool thing to examine from there. So I mean, admittedly, there are some things that I will just start to write because there's this feeling that I want to examine, and I'll choose one of the lenses from which to examine it. And I mean, it's honestly like organized journaling.
I love it. Like, Jen, I love what you said that, because here's the thing that we all know, because we're taught this. I mean, most of us are taught this. If we had good parenting, or at some point in life we figured this out, that all of our feelings are okay and all of our feelings are valid. And so what you just said is, if you've ever had a feeling in your life, there's a place to go for inspiration.
Oh, totally.
And I think that is such a gift. And I know a lot of people become, I'm sure there's people who will hear this, like, you become prolific after a heartbreak or after loss, right? You feel the desire to do something with that energy, right? And so tap into that over and over and over again in any small, I don't like the way the person talked to me at the register the other day. Okay, great. Where does that take you? Like, it just feels like there's so many more places for you to dig. Yeah. You describe that, right?
And I always feel like it will lead to something profound, right? Because it doesn't bug us because in that moment we're impatient. It bugs us because it rings this bell, but then, like, the Rube Goldberg mechanism of what it ultimately taps into, which is almost always a feeling of being too much or not enough.
Mhm.
Right?
Right.
Like,
Yes.
isn't that just the genesis of all of the pain and doubt and conditional joy and hope and like, yeah, just all of those very, very squishy, ripe and rich feelings come from this schism of I am too much to be loved or I am not enough to be loved. And like, I explore that dynamic constantly.
That feels like a really good acting technique, the way you just described that. Does that show up for you when you're thinking about the characters that you play when you go in for auditions ever?
Probably subconsciously, almost definitely. Yeah. I don't think I've ever elocuted it like that, but
Yeah.
yes.
It's interesting because I remember I saw the self tape of yours that was so fabulous. And I think it was a woman who's applying for a job or she was in a job interview. And I
Mhm.
remember she was definitely smarter than the person she was interviewing for, but she was having to pretend that she wasn't. I just remember, and
Oh, that
do
was
you
a Grey's
remember?
Anatomy one.
Okay, they're great. Right.
Yeah.
And so like that desire to be loved feels like something you could play with in a beautiful way. So I just really feels like I want to be liked. I want to be loved. And also I smarter than like, it just feels like such a fun little place to play with in a way. If that makes
Right?
sense. Yeah.
Yeah, at
Yeah.
the end of the day, like that's the question for all of us and how it expresses itself is different and that's where we get everybody's interesting colors and shades and tones. But like, yeah, at the end of the day, I think the question for everybody, every character, every individual is where do I need love in my life and why am I blocking it?
So profound. So, look where we're at today.
Oh my God.
I don't want to take too much more of your time, but I want to say a few things because I feel like I missed saying this earlier. Jen, you have an incredible podcast that this audience should know about if they don't already. And the name of it is incredible. You tell everybody what it's about.
All the Fucks is
Yes.
my podcast about caring too much. I mean, true to fucking form, to be frank. Given that I just talked about all of those, I'm like following a feeling. I am a very earnest person who copes through humor 95% of the time. Come from a ton of trauma and also beautiful and grew pretty well given all of that stuff and I cope through funny stories and through connecting with people who have also seen some shit. And so All the Fucks is really about navigating life in these moments of like profound depth in a way that is almost like just hard on your sleeve, deeply earnest, and generally fairly mortifying because it's so cool to not care.
Right.
It's just so cool to not care. And I have never been a person who doesn't care. I
Mm.
will never be I've tried for like 10 minutes at a time. It's virtually impossible. And so I co-host it with one of my best friends on earth, Lillian Bustle, a fellow Capricorn,
Yay.
who also like I've seen some shit. She has seen like atomic bomb nuclear level shit and the two of us just cope the same way and so we so enjoy sharing these stories with each other and exploring topics and a ton of adolescence. So for your listeners
Right.
who are into like who are into things like Pen 15
Great.
or like Freaks and Geeks or the Mortified podcast, we're definitely in
Got it.
that realm. But we talk about like tough life lessons as adults and what it's like to lose friends and what it's like to have the first moment where you like realize you're an adult in this, like profound and unsettling way and
Yeah.
yeah, it's
I love
it's
what
wonderful.
it sounds like it's to me that what you're describing is that we are so earnest in our feelings and it is our deep looking at who we've become, and where we got those places. And I think so many of us can
Yeah.
relate to our adolescence being where we figured out a bit of who we are.
Totally.
And where you describe that, that's what sounds so special about it. And it's allthefuckspodcast.com. So easy to remember. And so like
easy.
sneaky. It feels like sexy to type it a little bit.
I know, right? Yeah, Apple hates it. Apple uses asterisks.
Does it?
It took forever for Apple to acknowledge that we were a real podcast, but it's all good. You can still find us.
Wait, but I also love that you had to wage a war to make sure that your podcast could be on. I just love that you had to like, but what about, but no, but this has to be the name. So you got to figure yourselves out. We're not figuring ourselves out. I just love that dedication to your name. Like, should we change our name? No, you shouldn't change your name. I love that.
I was married to that name the second that I thought of it. And this podcast lived in my head for like a year and a half before all the pieces fell into place, honestly, about a year ago. And I was like, oh, do I want to just like solo host and maybe have a guest every week? Well, that kind of feels weird. And then about a year ago, I was like, no, call Lillian and have it be just you and her sharing stories. And then everything kind of lit up like a pinball machine. And so that's also been a hugely wonderful way for me to both be creative and also cope during COVID, because like, I will say from basically the first week of quarantine all the way up until the murder of George Floyd, we were doing episodes every day because we're just at home. So I get to just chat with my best friend for like an hour and laugh with her and make something that hopefully makes somebody else's day easier and more copable. And then at that moment in time, it felt like we were experiencing such a social shift in the way that we were living through every day that that the fluff was no longer appropriate. So we did weekly episodes yet again. But I mean, that has been a great way for me to be connected and creative and accountable and also like present in my feelings. So I'm not turning my feelings off, at least not all the time. I'm sure that there are moments during the last 8 months where I've just flipped that switch and but at least I'm showing up for that and just acknowledging that I'm like a squishy, emotional animal.
Yeah. And what I love what you're saying about this too, is that like, it becomes a practice in some ways. And I think so often creative people, we can feel like, well, I guess I can do this. And then I'm going to do that. And then I'm going to do this. And it can be like, there's nothing to do right now. Like it can be a event. Creativity becomes an event instead of what you've just described as a practice. Even writing your pilot probably felt like, well, we're working towards the next draft or working towards, and like, right. And this feels like it can be more of a practice, which I always find like you get to, when you have a date in your mind or you have an idea of we're going to go do this podcast, it suddenly becomes a magnet for thoughts you have between now and the next time you get to do it. Totally. I'm going to talk about that when I do that. I'm going to do that on Thursday at 2:00. You get to have that. So that's a gift for us to be reminded of as well. Well, Jen, I want to thank you because I've kept you for quite a while. I'm so grateful for this time together. Good. Is there one question for you to leave us with? So this is Brian Break's character. What does break character mean to you when you hear it?
Being fully present in joy.
Love it. I love it. I love that because it makes me think of when we experience joy, we're often not able to say it in the moment because it's just already happening when you're fully present, right? That makes me think about. I love that. Anything else you want to leave with this audience? Where we can find you? We can find you at Jen Ponton at Instagram at Jen Ponton.
Yes. Great. And I'm pretty present on Instagram, fairly present on Twitter, but definitely Instagram.
Okay, great. Anything else you need to say before we break the door down, shut the door?
I just hope everybody finds a little inspiration and joy from this. And if it lights something up on you, wonderful. Just let yourself be creative. Give yourself permission to have no holds barred creativity. Coloring, singing, writing, just making a mess, whatever it is. Open that door.
And I want to just say, I want to double down on what Jen just said, because I can't wait to see whatever it is you make or don't make. Because what I know is that when you start this journey to creativity, something comes and it may be the thing that's meant to be seen, or the next thing you make may be the next. Like, that's just a step. They're all stepping stones to expression. So grateful for you today. Thank you so much, Jen.
Thanks, Brian.
Thank you, for sure.